importance of healthy eating and exercise, as you might expect, they cannot take over the responsibility of health professionals. The answer lies in the home, and parents should not abdicate their responsibility. I mean, she does say that policymakers are well-intentioned, but she has more criticism for parents whose children start school, as you say, not being able to use the toilet. Toilet training is the role of parents and carers and should not be left to schools, she'll say. Only in the most extreme cases should parents be excused from the most basic of parenting tasks. You get the very strong sense from what she's saying that the responsibility at the moment is far too much with the school. In return, the Department for Education actually says schools have had investment and powers to do some of this work.
Simon, thanks very much indeed. That's our reporter Simon Clemison in central London for us this morning.
In other news today, the French President Emmanuel Macron will meet his Prime Minister and other senior officials today to discuss the violent protests that took place in Paris.
At least 110 people were injured and more than 270 were arrested when anti-government protesters burned cars, vandalised buildings and clashed with riot police, as Bill Hayton reports.
Parisians are used to demonstrations, but this violence was of an intensity rarely seen in the French capital. Smoke from torched cars mixed with water cannon and tear gas deployed by riot police. One protester was left in a critical condition as these metal gates were ripped down. Demonstrators also scrawled anti-Macron graffiti on structures, including the Arc de Triomphe. At the G20 in Argentina, the French president condemned the violence, much of which the authorities believe was caused by extremists from both the left and right.
What happened today in Paris has nothing to do with the peaceful expression of a legitimate anger. No cause justifies that authorities are attacked, that businesses are plundered, that passers-by or that the Arc de Triomphe is defiled.
What began 2 weeks ago as a peaceful protest by the so-called Yellow Vest movement against rising fuel taxes has now evolved into a far broader show of anti-government anger. Later, on his return to France, Emmanuel Macron will convene an urgent meeting with his Prime Minister and other senior officials to address the situation. But on the ground in Paris, the clean-up has already begun. Time for many to survey the damage and try to understand how a peaceful march could turn into such a dark day of destruction for the City of Light. Bill Hayton, BBC News.
Opposition parties, including the DUP, will write to the Speaker of the House of Commons in an attempt to force the government to publish its full legal advice on the Brexit withdrawal agreement.
Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, Labour's Brexit spokesman Sir Keir Starmer said if the advice was not published in full, he and other parties would start proceedings for contempt of Parliament. Let's get more detail on this from our political correspondent Jonathan Blake. Jonathan, just explain what is this legal advice and why could it be so difficult for the Prime Minister?
Well, this is an attempt to make what was already going to be a difficult week for Theresa May even trickier. This is all about the legal advice that the government gets through the Attorney General, Sir Geoffrey Cox, in private, in cabinet meetings and in other high-level government meetings about the way that the government's Brexit agreement with the EU, the withdrawal agreement which sets out the terms of our divorce, will work and the possible implications of that. Usually this advice is given in private and that's an established way of doing things, but Sir Keir Starmer, Labour's shadow Brexit secretary, says these are exceptional circumstances and therefore the government should make that advice public. Some Brexiteers want to see it and want to hear it because they believe it will set out the difficulties of the UK being able to withdraw itself from an EU customs union. The government is resisting, though. It's going to give a statement to Parliament tomorrow with a summary only. That won't be enough for some.
Jonathan, for now, thank you. Jonathan Blake there, our political correspondent, with those details.
Now, the United States has announced that it's reached an agreement on trade with China after talks at the G20 summit in Argentina. President Trump met Chinese leader Xi Jinping and confirmed he will not carry out threats to raise tariffs on Chinese goods from 10 to 25%. China's foreign minister said it opened up what he called win-win cooperation.
Theresa May has backed the Metropolitan Police over their controversial new tactics for stopping moped-riding criminals. Scotland Yard last week released this dramatic footage showing police vehicles knocking suspects off their scooters. Well, the Prime Minister said that a robust response was needed to what she described as a growing problem of people using the vehicles to commit crimes such as bag and phone snatching.
Now, lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans people are becoming trapped in abusive relationships because they say that the police don't take them seriously. That's according to a new BBC investigation.
Yeah, one LGBT charity told Radio 5 Live Investigates that the number of people they're seeing has doubled in the last 5 years. Well, Adrian Goldberg is with us from the programme. Adrian, morning.
Yeah, morning, man.
I mean, these findings, in any scenario, these are horrible findings, but then particularly applicable, it says, for LGBT people who aren't able to seek the help that they need.
And very often there will be a barrier of perception if you are a member of one of the LGBT communities. If you're a gay man, for example, you may feel that the police won't take you seriously because they will say, well, look, you're a man, you should be able to stand up for yourself. Or if you're a lesbian, they might say, well, the perpetrator is female, it's not as bad as being attacked by a man. These, as I say, are perception barriers that sometimes prevent LGBT people from going to the authorities. But it's interesting that we asked all 46 UK police forces for figures relating to LGBT domestic abuse. Only a third of them were able to provide those figures. So if we don't know the scale of the problem, it is very difficult to start dealing with it, and it does beg questions about how well LGBT people who go to the police for support in these cases are signposted and how well they're supported.
And what does the government say?
Well, they say they support a national LGBT domestic abuse hotline, and they say that they have consulted recently on how better to support people within these communities.
Adrian, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And you can hear more on that 5 Live Investigates story at 11 o'clock this morning and on the BBC Sounds app and Radio 5 Live. It is 9 minutes past 7. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. Shall we have a little look at the front pages that we have so far?
There's sort of two stories really dominating, aren't they? Brexit, of course, the story we've been talking about this morning, and about that legal advice on the front of most of the papers. But
and one story that hasn't made the papers because it's only just happened in the last couple of hours or so is, of course, the Tyson Fury fight, which has happened in Los Angeles just in the last couple of hours. If you weren't up at 4:30 this morning to watch it, you might not know that the heavyweight boxer Tyson Fury has drawn his first major comeback fight against America's Deontay Wilder.
Yeah, he is, of course, the self-styled Gypsy King from Preston. Well, he outboxed his opponent for much of the match, but, well, he was also knocked down twice. Well, we can speak to the BBC's Ade Adedoyin, who's in Los Angeles for us. Ade, morning to you, or good evening where you are. Just talk us through this, because, well, it was quite the fight, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a brilliant performance by Tyson Fury, and you're right, you know, he's come back from 2.5 years out of the sport. He's only had 2 fights against a substandard opponent, nowhere near the standard of a Deontay Wilder, and yet he pushed the WBC champion, one of the hardest punchers in the game, all the way. He was put down in the middle of the rounds, and it was hit by the side of the head, really got up from that one, but the second knockdown in the 12th round, how he got up from that, I'll never know. He looked like he was out cold, and somehow he dragged himself up. Not only dragged himself up, he actually hurt Wilder towards the end of the round as well. Incredible story. And when you consider as well, he was battling illness, he was battling mental health issues, depression, drink and drugs, ballooned to 28 stone in weight at some point in the last 2.5 years. And then he gathered himself and produced the performance he did tonight. In a lot of ways, I think he'll feel like the moral victor, because a lot of people that I spoke to here predicted that he would get knocked out, and yet, had he not gone down in that 12th round, we'll be talking about a new heavyweight champion.
Ade, just wait there for us for one moment, because in the last few moments we just heard that Tyson Fury has been talking to the media. Let's hear how he and his trainer, Ben Davison, reacted when asked why they actually seemed happy with the draw.
We all know sitting in this room who won that fight, but he also could have caused a riot if he kicked off about that scorecard.
Do you know what it was? I was telling my brothers and my family to keep quiet. There was about 8,000 travellers and Brits who come from around the world, 10,000. They probably would have smashed this arena up if I'd have instigated it. I mean to the floor.
So really, he's owed a thank you for keeping that, being professional and doing it under that conduct.
I just wanted to be an ambassador for my country and my people.
Ade, I don't know if you were able to hear that or if you were there when that happened, but that's Tyson Fury trying to kind of calm things, I guess, after the result, which would have been a shock to many of the travelling fans who were there.
Yeah, he had quite a huge number of people who came to support him. We saw that at the weigh-in and in the arena as well. They seemed to outnumber the Deontay Wilder fans. They were in great spirits, chanting his name. And I understand what he was saying about the reaction of some of the crowd, because some of them were sat very near me. They were very upset about the decision. They felt that he won. One of the judges' scorecard, 150 and 111, has created a lot of headlines because it was a close fight, and it certainly didn't seem like it was that wide a margin. Lennox Lewis, the former heavyweight champion of the world, who's here in Los Angeles, is suggesting that the champion, Deontay Wilder, was gifted the decision. He's posted a message on social media. He said the similar thing happened to me when I faced Evander Holyfield here in the United States, and it proves that, Lennox Lewis is saying, it proves that if you're a British fighter, it's very, very hard to get a decision here. So a lot of people feeling that Tyson Fury won. One thing that everybody that I've spoken to here agrees on is that we'd like to see it again, because it was that good a contest. I spoke to Frank Warren, his promoter, says he'd like to put it on again, he'd like to put it on next year, and he believes it's a fight that could sell out a stadium. What that means as far as Anthony Joshua, who's waiting in the wings, we'll wait to see. Joshua has Wembley booked for April next year.
Ade, it could all happen again, couldn't it? Thank you very much indeed. That's Ade Adedoyin in Los Angeles for us. Who knows what will happen with Anthony Joshua and potentially Tyson Fury in the next 12 months.
Yeah, Ollie's got all the sport. That'll be coming up about 7:30, so there's much more on that for you. But plenty of other news today, including news that leaders from around the world are meeting for the first time since a damning report warned that much needed to be done to prevent irreversible damage to the planet.
Last month, scientists outlined how to avoid a climate catastrophe.
Yeah, well, one of the report authors is Professor Miles Allen. He joins us now from our Oxford newsroom. Mr. Allen, good morning to you. Nice to see you. Good morning. Look, let's take this back to basics, because, you know, we talk about these headlines, we see these numbers, don't we, about global warming at 1 degree, 2 degrees, what impact that could make. Just start at the beginning for us. Where are we? How much of a risk is this?
Well, we're now at 1 degree. We're warming at about a couple of tenths of a degree per decade, so it won't be long, around 2040, when we get to 1.5 degrees. If we want to reduce emissions fast enough to avoid going over 1.5 degrees, it's very simple. We've got to get carbon dioxide emissions in particular down to zero. And that's going to be a big ask, but crucially, it is still possible.
It is still possible, and yet at the same time we are in an era whereby there is so much confusion, there is so much doubt, there are so many people, including the President of the United States, who say it just doesn't happen.
Well, he's not actually saying it's not happening anymore, and very few people are saying it's not happening anymore. That line is rather has gone a bit tired, really, over the past few years. One of the most widely quoted, one of the things people are really concerned about is, of course, the eye-watering cost of solving the problem. And one of the most widely quoted numbers from the report I was an author on was that it would cost $800 billion a year, or more than that, to transition our energy system to zero carbon, so as to be fit for the second half of this century. Now, that's a huge amount of money, but it's less than 10% of what we spend every year on energy. So when you put it into that perspective, when you realize that, you know, the global fossil fuel industry actually needs to be seen, and its customers, which includes, of course, you and me, it needs to be seen as the solution to the problem rather than part of the problem, then the whole thing starts to look a bit more feasible.
Isn't the problem here that we all feel a bit helpless in making a difference? Because we all know that maybe we should walk rather than using the car a little bit more often. Maybe we should turn down the thermostat. Maybe we should use less energy. And then we look at developing countries, we look at industrialized nations like China, who are pumping out so many fossil fuels.
Well, that's exactly the point. I mean, obviously individuals can help by just using less energy. I'm not denying that. On the other hand, until the industry itself becomes part of the solution, we're not going to make progress. For less than the taxes you pay when you fill your car with petrol, the company selling you that petrol could get rid of the carbon dioxide contained in that petrol, and you could drive your car to your heart's content and have no impact on the planet. But the company's not being asked to do so. So that's what needs to change. And there are some hopeful signs. Well,
should it be those producers who are creating that fuel, or the organisations that are polluting, or is it us as individuals to drive that change? Because it seems it's very easy to pass the buck, isn't it?
Well, of course, in the end, the consumer pays. At the moment, we use fossil fuels and we dump the main waste product in the atmosphere. We just use the atmosphere as a giant landfill for our carbon dioxide. Now, we don't do that for many other things. Most waste products, we expect whoever's creating the waste or whoever's selling the product that's creating the waste to get rid of it. And that can be done for carbon dioxide, but it's expensive. And about the only institution in the world that has the resources, the access to capital and the engineering skills to do it is the industry itself. So they've got to be brought into the solution rather than just being seen as part of the problem.
How confident are you that this meeting will change anything?
Well, this is a transitional meeting. It's mostly about process. It's about agreeing rules for going forward after the Paris meeting in 2015. So I think it's, we're not going to expect any major new announcements, but I think there are some hopeful signs, particularly about the involvement in companies and cities and institutions other than just national governments in the whole climate process. That's one of the areas where most is happening on the climate front at the moment.
It's good to talk to you. Professor Miles Allen, thank you for your time this morning, and clearly that debate will run, but that meeting getting underway, and as you heard there, potentially has the power to sort of change minds, but it's an uphill battle, as we know.
We've been talking about messy weather this morning, haven't we, with Louise?
It's quite a good definition, really. It says all you need to know.
It does. Louise, can you explain to everybody who are just waking up perhaps what we mean by messy weather? Morning.
That's a cry for help, I tell you. Good morning. Trying to get my head around it at 6 o'clock in the morning. There's a little bit here and a little bit there and it's a mess. I'd just like a nice sunny day or a lot of rain, but it's not, unfortunately. So, bear with me. I will try and explain it as best I can. Most of us will see a story like this. A lot of cloud around, the cloud thick enough for some drizzle at the moment, and even some showers. And the reason why it's a bit of a mess is that most of us are under the influence of the Atlantic at the moment, and these weather fronts that are piling in off the Atlantic, with the exception really the far north. In Scotland we've got a cooler source here, a chilly start to the day. But, as I say, a lot of cloud around, some showery outbreaks of rain into Northern Ireland, central southern Scotland and northern England here a little bit more persistent. Clearer skies and a chilly start across the far northeast, but elsewhere a lot of cloud, and the cloud thick enough for some drizzle. Eventually they will turn into showers, being driven on by a pretty strong wind, and in fact gusting close to Channel Coast around 40 miles an hour. So that is going to be a windy, showery scenario, but a mild one, 14 or 15 degrees, the wind source driving in that mild air. The exception is Scotland, here under the cool air, 6 or 7 degrees. There you go, I told you it was a bit of a mess. Then through the night tonight, we see more persistent rain across the Scottish borders, travelling its way further east. We keep those clearer skies into the far north. Again, overnight lows around 3 or 4 degrees, but further south, it's a mild story. And we do it all again. Still under the influence of this Atlantic source, so we've got mild but breezy conditions across the south, bringing in more organised rain. So that is going to bring some rain across the southwest, into Wales, through parts of northern England during the day on Monday. But further north, we're still under the influence of this northerly flow, so cooler air, scattering of showers close to the coast there, but temperatures struggling 5 to 7 degrees, whereas further south, breezy, milder, 12 or 13 degrees the high. The only real exception is Monday night into Tuesday morning. The northerly wind just sneaks its way further south, and with clearer skies, those temperatures are going to fall away. So Tuesday morning could be quite a chilly start, and that'll be a shock to the system, particularly across England and Wales where it's been so mild. So that's worth bearing in mind. If you're up and off early on Tuesday, many of us could start off with a touch of frost, not perhaps down into the extreme south, but it will be a chilly start to Tuesday morning. It's not expected to last. Guess what? Yep, we go back to the Atlantic, we go back to that milder source, bringing some wetter weather in. The winds swing round to a southwesterly direction, and we're back to temperatures being above where they should be for this time of year across England and Wales. Cool again in the north. Back to you two.
Louise, that wasn't messy at all. You explained it perfectly.
I'm going to ask you to summarise it in 10 seconds.
Love it.
I'm just keeping an eye on those double figures. It's December and we're in sort of 11, 12, 13.
It's cosy.
Yeah.
Get rid of the big coat.
Boiling.
Now, speak to anyone working on a building site, and a common complaint will be the strain the physical work has on their backs and joints.
So what's the answer? Well, it could be a piece of high-tech kit that's been developed in America to help patients with mobility issues. Well, our correspondent Joe Miller has been getting to grips with an exoskeleton vest.
A simple screw driven by a mixture of man and machine. This isn't the set of a superhero film. It's just a construction site in Bristol. staffed by bionic builders.
Repetitive movement on any joints, eventually you feel something. I have tennis elbow at the minute, and to be honest, lifting the boards today, this hasn't been too bad at all.
This cyborg-like vest was originally built to rehabilitate stroke victims, and for the first time in the UK, it's being used to reduce the strain of routine overhead work. Under my own steam, this can get tiring quite quickly. But transformed into Iron Man, I can keep doing this all day long with the help of my second skeleton, which is able to support the weight of up to 2 large bowling balls. They may look like elaborate toys, but exoskeletons are not just a gimmick.
There's something like 125,000 work-related injuries in construction manufacturing each year, which is a staggering figure. If the vest can take that away because it's doing some of the work for them, then that's a positive.
Is this a step towards the robots taking over?
Well, I think we're a little bit way off that yet. There are new technologies, and we all know the construction industry needs to modernise. It has to do that.
Exoskeletons are already hard at work in America, reducing fatigue on Ford's busy production lines. Not everyone is a fan. Some are worried that this tech will give bosses an excuse to demand longer hours and push for a later retirement age. And when tested in a battlefield simulation, researchers found exoskeleton wearers were slower to react. There is no lack of focus back in the West Country, where even younger workers are keen to embrace their robotic assistants. But exoskeleton tech is still in its infancy, and the next generation of mechanized sidekicks might just decide to do away with their masters. Joe Miller, BBC News, Bristol.
You are watching Breakfast from BBC News. It is 24 minutes past 7. Time now for a look at this morning's papers.
Well, the political historian Mike Finn is here to tell us what's caught his eye. Mike, morning to you.
Morning, guys.
There's a lot in the papers. Let's start with a little bit of politics, but I don't want to do a little bit. Yeah. There's a lot elsewhere in the programme. But
let's do your specialist subject first.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like I'm a mastermind.
What have you picked out for us? This is in the Telegraph, isn't it, first of all?
Yeah, so the first one from the Telegraph. It's really, I mean, we can't get away from Brexit at the moment, can we? No matter what we try and do. And we are in, you know, I'm in Manchester, so we are in the Fergie time sort of position now with regard to Brexit.
Like it.
We're getting there. But this is really what people are afraid of and what people are going to be motivated by when it comes to this parliamentary vote. And there's been a snap poll conducted by Electoral Calculus, or rather a snap poll of polls, of 13,000 voters, which basically says that were there a general election imminently, as Jeremy Corbyn has been arguing for, then Labour would be in a position to form a government with the SNP. And of course, the reason this is significant is I think most people accept there probably isn't going to be a general election. But this will be something that focuses Tory MPs' minds going into that vote. Well, do they really want to vote down the deal? Do they really want to jeopardise the PM at this point?
And this probably also figured in the rationale of the Bank of England, wasn't it? Because they were talking this week about what could potentially happen, and there was a lot of fear of sort of from the financial community about what a Labour government could mean for the state of the economy and things like house prices and growth as well. That was weighing on their mind.
Yeah, and I think if you go back even before the Bank of England's comments and Mark Carney's comments, you know, when you go back to Jeremy Corbyn speaking at the CBI, you could see Jeremy Corbyn very clearly trying to assuage the CBI recently and trying to say, well, actually, it's not going to be the end of the world.
And also, that's a relationship that has been ongoing behind closed doors for a long time now, that's been developing and growing.
And something they've had to work on. And, you know, but I think you're seeing here a clear sense that Tory MPs, are they more scared of Corbyn than they are of voting down this deal? So.
Well, there you go. That's your pick from The Observer.
Yeah, and I think this is something the Labour watchers won't be too surprised by. You know, the idea that Labour has gradually been inching towards a second referendum. Now, Corbyn has taken a lot of flack over the past couple of years for the vague position of the Labour Party. There's been splits within the party. Obviously, there's this very strong Remain faction. But the organisation that has supported Momentum have pretty much come around to a Remain position fairly concretely. John McDonnell, obviously in midweek, speaking to yourselves, was saying that they were moving towards a referendum. And it looks like now this is increasingly going to be the only real way out for Labour.
Let's move away from some of the politics, although it's very difficult to get too far away, isn't it? Because this will come down to health policy. But an 88-mile trek to the dentist, says the Sunday Express. So some patients being forced to travel a long way.
I'm sort of confused by what is an NHS dentist these days anyway, because you end up paying for quite a lot, even though it's technically an NHS dentist.
Yeah, I know this is something that as well, if you're someone like me who tries to avoid going to the dentist whenever possible, I know we shouldn't, but if you're on a 10-year gap, as you might say, you come through different eras of NHS dentistry provision. So you suddenly turn up and then you realise, oh my God, the world's changed. And that did happen to me. And I think in respect to what you're saying, there's different price bands in the NHS, isn't there? But in this case, the story is by the British Dental Association. They've done this analysis where they've shown that in some parts of the country, it's 88 miles to get from your home to your practice. And actually, there's one stat they give out there that in North Norfolk, it's over 5 hours on public transport to get from a home to a practice, which is phenomenal. And, as somebody who gets very nervous while going to the dentist, the idea of being on a bus 5 hours waiting to arrive is particularly terrifying.
And just that idea that you're going to have to, when you get there, you'll probably be in a surgery that's overcrowded because there are so few of them, trying to serve so many patients. And it's because a lot of dentists are going private.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's like essentially the quest for the Philosopher's Stone and trying to find an NHS dentist in certain parts of the country, and that's really what this bears out.
Really quickly, I know we're running out of time, but I just want to share this because this is the TV show I wish I'd thought of. Who ate all the pies? It's this lot. ITV have got together a team of former footballers who all need to lose a little bit of weight, managed by Harry Redknapp, and over a period of time have tried to get them to get back into their old England shirts from the 90s.
I love the comparison pictures as well.
They are great. Tell me why you picked this one.
No, I picked it because there's going to be a couple of angles on this story. Obviously, as you've said, it's a show that's being put on. Harry Redknapp's coaching them. They're trying to lose this cumulative 40 stone between them. But for me, some people are going to look at this and say, this is fat shaming, this is really bad. Actually, for me, as someone who is not an athlete, never has been, other than darts possibly, that's my athletics, but this is something where I can empathise with, and actually if I see professional athletes struggling with the same kinds of dilemmas that I and others struggle with, then it's really actually quite motivating to see them trying to take it on and realising that we're all human, we all face these problems, and it just gives you a little bit of a lift.
It's relatable too, isn't it? They're all men of a similar age who want to lose a little bit of weight because perhaps they've...
It must be so tough if you're an elite athlete like that and you're training and your meal plans are organised for you and all of that thing, and then suddenly that ends and you've kind of got to fend for yourself without that. It's tough.
So the aim was to lose 40 stone. They're not saying how much they actually lost, but it wasn't quite that.
Yeah, the phrase they used was it didn't quite go according to plan.
It didn't quite go. Can't wait to see that. Mike, thanks very much indeed.
Nice to see you. Thanks, Mike. Stay with us. Headlines coming up at 12:30.
8 minutes ago, a sunbeam struck out into the vast vacuum of space. It did not bounce off course as so many others do. It was not absorbed. When it reached our atmosphere, it continued unfazed. This particular sunbeam came to you. And you were ready for it. To know what's coming, check the BBC Weather app.
Hello, this is Breakfast with Ben Thompson and Sally Nugent.
Good morning to you. Here is a summary of today's main stories from BBC News. Parents should not expect schools to police children's eating and exercise or to toilet train pupils. That's the warning from England's Doctor Who has entered a new era that embraces inclusivity with the first female Doctor, of course, and a pretty diverse cast of companions.
Tonight, the show introduces
with you. If you don't mind me asking, what's got you so scared? The Thing?
Oh, not giving too much away.
No.
But that's on tonight, of course, isn't it? Tell us about, being on set with such an amazing cast there. What difference did it make? How difficult is it with your condition to be on set, and what does it let you do? What are the challenges?
To be honest, it wasn't too bad and it wasn't too difficult because before I actually started filming, we went for an orientation. So the crew, they were amazing actually. They were so supportive. They took me around the set, explained to me what I would be filming, how I would be filming, and in particularly difficult scenes where I had to either run or walk really fast or something like that. They blocked it out for me first, so I never felt like I was going to run into the unknown. I always felt really at home, and it was always quite familiar. And by the time that I got really into filming, the set I could just navigate it really. And I suppose another challenge was just sort of keeping up with everyone else and making sure that I knew all my lines properly, because I didn't have any scripts to work off of because I couldn't see them. But those are really easy to overcome, and I never felt like I sort of had to work really hard. I just felt like another cast member, really.
So, chatting to you, it doesn't seem to me like you feel like what you're doing is particularly groundbreaking, but are you aware that actually it is?
Yes, I think, to be honest, I think it's quite shocking that it's taken such a big show this long to have a fully blind actor, but that's just how it is. People still cast able-bodied actors in disabled roles, and I think that's starting to change, and I hope that this role will show people that disabled actors can keep up with, in quotation marks, able-bodied actors, and that it's not really any different, it's just more authentic, really.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask, actually, because, do you think this sort of sets a precedent of saying, look, all of these things that you've been able to do in probably one of the most energetic shows that's on telly, which is running around and jumping and all these sort of things, that perhaps a lot of casting directors would have thought you couldn't do, and you've just proved them you absolutely can?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the time disabled actors are limited by perceptions of what they can't do, when it actually should be approached with what can they do and what can we do to help them make that possible.
What's next for you, Ali?
I'd like to definitely pursue acting in the future. I did a radio play recently in the last few days, and that's been really amazing because I've never done radio before. But yeah, I hope to go to university next year, and I'm not really sure what exactly is on the table for the future, but I just want to keep my options open.
So you're still at school?
Yeah,
well, still studying?
I'm at the Royal National College for the Blind at the moment, and I'm doing like a gap year course, and I'm doing performing arts and independence and things like that. So they've been really supportive as well.
Final tough question. I know you can't talk about anything that goes on tonight. How hard has it been keeping the secret?
Horrible. It's been so difficult. I only found out, well, it was, oh God, 3 weeks ago that the news broke nationally, and so I've had to keep it for a year, more or less.
A year?
It's been so tough. But yeah, I mean, thank goodness I can speak about it now.
Yeah, not long to wait, of course, either. So it's on tonight. Eddie, really nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Brilliant.
You can see Eddie in Doctor Who. That's on BBC One tonight at 6:30.
I will be watching.
Yeah.
I cannot wait for that one. It's exactly 7:45. Let's go to Louise now, who has this morning's weather for us. Morning, Louise.
Good morning. Can you imagine a whole year? I'm rubbish at keeping secrets. I would never have managed that one. Good morning, everybody. Quite a cloudy, messy story across the country today. It's incredibly mild down to the south, but to the north, we've had some clearer skies through the night. And for you, it's a little on the chilly side. So let's take a look and try and explain exactly what's going off. For Scotland, we're under the influence of colder northerly winds, but the rest of the country, it's windy, but it's a mild wind source coming up from the Atlantic Atlantic from a southwesterly or westerly direction. And that's going to produce quite a lot of clouds today. Hopefully it'll break up, but a scattering of showers being driven by a pretty brisk wind across those west-facing coasts. Now, the exception always the far northeast of Scotland. Here, we might continue to see some sunny spells, but despite lighter winds, temperatures are still going to struggle. Hovering close to freezing at the moment, so by the middle of the day, 6 degrees here if you're lucky. Further south, 14 or 15 degrees, way above the average for the early half of December. Now, as we go through the evening and overnight, we'll have more of a band of organised rain moving out of Northern Ireland, central southern Scotland and northern England. To the south of that, well, we keep some clearer skies, but it's still going to be a mild night, 10 or 11 degrees. To the north of that, under that influence of cold air, we're back to low single figures again, so a chilly start. As we move into Monday, still for most of the country under the influence of this Atlantic flow. So another weather front pushes in, and that's going to bring yet more rain with it. Again, we keep this westerly wind, so again, it's going to stay mild, but there will be outbreaks of rain moving through southwest England, Wales, central and northern England through the day. To the far north, again, clearer skies. A chillier feel, 5 to 7 degrees. And so that's going to be the setup as we go through the week. But it's worth bearing in mind that that cooler air will just nibble away a little bit further south Monday night into Tuesday morning as we keep some quieter weather for a time. So Tuesday morning looks likely to be the cold